I'm kind of curious. I forced myself not to do a bunch of research on you. That way this could be like a genuine conversation, you know?
Totally.
Because obviously I love the music, but I didn't look up a whole backstory or anything like that. So where are you originally from? And I guess we can kind of start there.
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Monroe, New York, which is about an hour outside of New York City where I am now. And it's like it's kind of like not much going on, kind of just like your classic American small town. But it's an East Coast town, so you know, it's in proximity to a lot of other places that I found exciting. The town I grew up in, not very exciting, though.
About how much population?
It is pretty populated. Like, I graduated in a class of 670.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like, it's like one of the last commuter towns when you're heading up north from New York City.
Gotcha.
It's probably like the last one before it gets pretty rural. So it's pretty populated. They have a shopping mall. That's it.
Yes.
Well,
we're out here living in a town in Wyoming of 3,500 people. That's basically an hour away from any necessities. So
yeah, I think
when you
my
said you were on Mountain Time, I was wondering what that was about.
You're like, who is this guy? But yeah, so we grew up in a town to where like kindergarten, you start out with maybe like 70, 75 kids. You graduate with about 58.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That was like my class. We might be the black eye of the community. But yeah, that's just kind of where we grew up. So that's a foreign land, even being a small town on the East Coast.
So have you ever been to like Denver?
I've been to Denver a couple times. I played a folk festival a couple years ago up in shit, I forgot, but I flew into Denver and I got very stoned. Somebody handed me a joint right when I arrived.
It's a parting gift.
And they wouldn't let me check into my room at the Red Roof Inn, so then I just had to sit in the lobby, and I thought they were all conspiring against me.
Right, yeah. As you do.
So, yeah, man, it was a trip for sure.
For sure. Yeah, so we're located about 2 hours north of there, just straight up the interstate.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so not too far from the big city, but yeah, still super small town, Wyoming. Not much going on. It's hard to
understand, man. We have to drive an hour from the place we record at. We have to drive an hour to get to the closest Walmart. Like,
oh wow.
I mean, it sounds a lot more rural than it is, but really it's not. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
but that's cool, man. I've never actually been to Wyoming. That's like one of the few states I haven't gotten to yet.
Well, if you ever get the chance, man, we'd love to sit down, obviously in person, and do this thing. That's for sure.
For sure.
And spread the
I'll let you
word.
know if I'm ever coming through.
So in your childhood and stuff, I guess I'm just kind of curious as far as like influences in the music, and specifically maybe a role model, like a teacher maybe that got you kind of passionate about working towards it.
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, my parents had like a really extensive record collection, and I would sort of thumb through that and listen to their vinyl records, and I just like really took to it. So when I was 6, they got me guitar lessons.
Nice.
And I at this guitar shop that I ended up working at when I was a teenager, and I stayed with that my whole life. And it was honestly the only strange or like mystical part of my story is the fact that I was so interested in specifically what I do now at a very young age. Like I've always wanted to be a singer-songwriter, which is very strange because like 5-year-olds in 1994 don't really know what a singer-songwriter is.
Right.
So what were those records?
That was the goal. What's that?
What were those records that you were listening to?
Well, it was The River by Bruce Springsteen. That was huge. Okay. And then my dad would play me a lot of Creedence. And then
the real CCR.
Yeah. And then my mom was like big into Laurel Canyon songwriters, so it was a lot of Jackson Browne and James Taylor, and so that they were kind of the two sides. And then I kind of found my way with my own sort of the indie rock bands of the 2000s that I kind of got into and, carved out my own space with.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said Jackson Browne. That's something that me and Chris kind of specifically talked about. More so, he mentioned it to me, so I don't want to take the credit. But I'm definitely a huge fan of Jackson Browne. That makes a lot of sense. And I know both him and me are both big Eagles guys, big Jackson Browne guys. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's funny, man. I was just thinking about the other day how, like, people respect Jackson Browne, but I still think he's criminally underrated because he's been at so many important junctures of the music world that people don't give him credit for, like when he wrote These Days, and then Nico had, you know, like sort of a cult hit with it, and he played guitar on it, and or like, you know, just crazy stuff that like people don't realize about Jackson Browne.
He wrote Take It Easy.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I feel like, yeah, I think that he, in the vernacular, he's become sort of like, people lump him in with other soft rockers, but to me, he's so much more than that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still think back to that Eagles documentary on Netflix. Came out a couple of years ago when Glenn Frey was talking about his songwriting process, and he would just basically hammer it out at the keyboard.
Yeah.
The
only time he took a break was to drink some tea.
Drink a little tea. Yeah.
I love that. I love that documentary.
Yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch it tonight if I have to, man. I don't care.
I'm always somewhere in the process of watching that documentary.
Absolutely.
Always somewhere in the middle.
The Troubadour, man, the big launching pad of the Troubadour is so interesting, dude. There's so many different avenues to go down, and you can just see, like, Lena Ronstadt being, I mean, she developed what became the Eagles in some fashion. Like, she influenced them so much. Jackson Browne, I mean, Crosby, Stills, and Nash was around there. I mean, it's insane with the amount of talent that came out of this little club.
I know, it's wild, and there was definitely a part of my musical upbringing that at a certain point in my life I romanticized that period so heavily that I was a bit of a relic, you know. It's taken me a long time to learn how to, you know, it's taken me until 2020 to be present in 2020.
I got you. That's so interesting. So the Brooklyn Bridge EP came around in 2012, right?
That's the first thing I did. Yeah.
Okay. So when did you start writing songs, like from an early age, and then those were like your 5 or 6 best songs that you had at the present time, or was that something you sat down and just fleshed out as an EP?
Yeah, that was basically it. I've been writing songs since I was probably like a teenager, real songs, you know, like probably coinciding probably with the first time I got dumped. So like 15,
I feel
right? And then even though I like always wanted to be a songwriter, like I'm sure before that you can barely string words together. So you're, but yeah, so I went to school in Boston, and over the course of the 4 years had sort of collected those songs. I think is there 5 songs on it? Is it 6 songs? 5 songs?
5 or 6. I'll find out right now.
And then we moved to Brooklyn. It was myself, the producer of that EP, Joran, my buddy Ken Yates, and they lived in a house in Greenpoint, and we recorded it on their roof. And it took about a year, and I expected the world to stop turning when I released it, and it did not.
Of course.
So.
Yeah, I kind of experienced something on a way smaller scale, but like I've been in the process of writing a bunch of songs, and we released one of my originals just as a live video. And,
oh, cool.
And I was like, okay, this is gonna get thousands of views, and I think as we stand right now, it's got like 200 views on Instagram. So 200 on.
You know, the other thing to note is, like, don't ever let those numbers get you down, because it's things that have worked out for me in my career thus far were never things I foresaw. The biggest, the most popular songs I have are both are random to me.
I do have a question about that, because it seems obviously have your songs that are more meaningful to you, as far as, like, you know, just brings out all the passion when you play it every night, that kind of thing, versus something getting repetitive and that kind of thing. Do you, I was going to ask specifically more so like with singles and stuff, how that gets decided, you know, if you still have the power to say, look, this is the one that I want released as a single, versus, you know, any confrontation trying to go a different direction.
Not really. The team that I work with is we're not. I'm not like a major pop star or anything. So
no.
You know, so they like, you know, if I want the best song to be the single, so it's usually a collaborative effort. Like, basically what we think is going to get the most people interested, you know.
Makes sense.
Just try, and I've been persuaded, I've made very few compromises in my art, I have to say. That's one
Okay.
of the better things about my career,
That's awesome.
There are things about the 60s and 70s and 80s that I do that I am jealous of, but one of them that I'm not jealous of is the having to compromise on the quality of your work. That seems like a lot of people were faced with that, and at the status I'm at now, I'd probably also have to, if I was living through that time, I would also be faced with those things. But because we're living through this sort of, we make everything ourselves, I have full creative control, and that's my favorite thing about the job.
Yeah.
Are you going to stick to that? I mean, is that something that you are going to carry forward as like a must have kind of thing? I mean, obviously some people are looking to sign a deal and whatever else, but is that something that's non-negotiable with you?
When we were we're getting ready to record the new album, I met with a label who shall remain nameless. They offered me a lot of money, and they said they weren't going to have me compromise on the art, but I didn't trust it, and so I walked from the deal and released it on my own. So I think that's number one, because all the other things that you think are going to come from any chain of events, they may or they may not. But the one thing that I can control is how good the songs are. Everything else is sort of out of your control,
That's a good point.
I like that a lot. I feel like that's something I'm needed to hear, honestly, because I've been experiencing a lot of like self-doubt in my songwriting, and so like I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you overcome that?
Self-doubt. Okay. Self-doubt plagues everyone, right? But in terms of, everyone starts with a blank piece of paper. The best writer, Bob Dylan, starts with a blank sheet of paper. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I try not to give too much credence to the magic or the mysticism of things. I try to think of it like it's building a house. I sit down every day to write. If I write a bad song, that's not an indicator that something's wrong. It just goes in the discard file.
Mm-hmm.
And the more bad songs you write, the more likely you are to get a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just sort of throwing darts. Some of the best ideas I've fallen upon, I can't say I really like. They were beautiful moments of deep understanding. I sometimes just fell upon them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, nobody is. Everybody wants to make it seem like they're a touched artist, but I don't know. So don't let anybody fool you.
I gotcha.
I'm not sure where that romanticizing came from. I mean, movies maybe, or I guess just Hollywood glamour, but
American Idol maybe. I don't know.
That's true.
I think it's it's what consumers want to hear. They want to hear that Jimi Hendrix fell from the sky. And I still buy into some of that. Like, I'll watch a documentary and be like, yeah, man, like, Jimi Hendrix was one of a kind, But when it's time to get to work, I try to put those thoughts away and think of it very practical.
Okay.
So just like if I want good songs, I gotta write a ton of songs.
Mm-hmm.
You want 10 good ones, you're gonna have to write 300 bad ones.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was that I originally heard say it, but getting the bad out is just as important as getting the good, obviously. Yeah. But to just get it down, get it out of your brain and move on if it's bad, and how important that was. I don't remember who originally said it or who told me or whatever, but I think that's a good point, and I'm glad you said that.
It's really important. And I think that, because obviously as a songwriter, people are always asking about things like writer's block and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, like, writer's block, it's like, this could be a song. If we sung it, it wouldn't be a very good song, but we could turn this conversation into a song and put it on Spotify. So a lot of times when people are dealing with writer's block, they're just in between songs that they like, and they've become discouraged. And I think that what I find very comforting is that And it creeps in every once in a while. But if the songs are bad, if you're writing stuff that you don't like, it burns because it's working.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. And that's like sort of my philosophy. So I try not to see when my abilities are not up to my ear yet, because that's also a part of it. Like your ear gets smarter before your ear hears the things that are wrong with your song before you can fix them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just try to remember that you will catch up.
So when you started out, you were in college. You said you went to college in Boston. Did you dabble in the open mic scene at all?
Not really open mics. I did some open mics in high school. In Boston, it's weird. You almost, when you're going to, I went to a music school called Berkeley. So there was a little bit
you ever heard of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna say that.
That's funny.
There's a little bit of like, I don't know, maybe a little bit of shame around going to do an open mic because it was such like a pretentious place.
Okay.
But also you're getting kind of a false start when you're at a school like that because your friends are all packing in your shows, Mm-hmm. When I left Boston, I thought I had a fan base, like because I could get 100 people out to a show, and then once all my friends dispersed around the country, I realized those were just people who liked to hang out at my parties and stuff.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and being in college, heading out to a bar that's playing live music, I mean, it's just word of mouth, invite your friends.
Yeah, and everybody's really excited to be in a city like Boston at that time. Everybody thinks everybody's about to be the next big thing because, it's all being pushed along by your professors and your friends and stuff like that. So,
did you witness anybody kind of explode? I mean, not necessarily go big time, but somebody that you were around that did make it that showed you it was possible, or it's just there's cranking out so many people out there? Because obviously we're not familiar enough with the area to be able to tell.
There were people already popping off, like some of the bluegrass people, like Sarah Jarosz was over at New England Conservatory. I remember paying close attention to her. And there were a few people that I went to school with that did played Letterman and stuff, but it's nothing like singular, I guess. Or maybe there are. I went to school with a kid named Charlie Puth that's pretty popular. But I didn't really know him.
Wow.
No.
And I also
but it's more so just being able to see it's achievable. You know what I mean? Because that's big for us around here anyway.
Totally. I don't know if I ever made that connection though, because it didn't. I was headed on my own path,
Right.
So, I don't know if I ever. I was definitely delusionally stubborn. So, anyone succeeding wouldn't have even clocked it. I wouldn't have even clocked it on my radar.
I like that.
So, one band that comes in mind to me, coming through the school of Berkeley, East Coast band. Have you ever heard of Honeysuckle?
Yeah.
Do you know those guys at all, or
I don't know them at all, but I've heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see who's in that band. Let's see, maybe I do know them.
A guy named Ben just left the band. He was the guitar player, and I guess he played banjo on some stuff. He just left the band. Now they're a two-piece.
Where were you going with that?
I was just I don't even know where I was going with it, honestly. I was just Honeysuckle is really my only other avenue into Berkeley that I know that went there, I guess.
There are a few Annie Clark from St. Vincent. She went to Berkeley and she was a few years ahead of me. The girls in Lucius, they hadn't popped when I was at school, but pretty soon after. But again, I didn't know any of these people. But I still work with a lot of friends of mine that, like Andrew Sarla, who produced the record. He and I went to school together, and
okay,
so
we've got that thing hyped up behind Chris. I don't know if you can see it or not with the camera, but we're trying to hype it up.
Oh, cool! Appreciate that.
I had to write it backwards for it to come out right, and I don't know if it's too blurry. It's really blurry on mine, but I don't know if you think.
It actually is still backwards to me.
It is?
Yeah, it must reverse the
Oh
video.
man, all that
I wrote
work.
it backwards for no reason. Oh no.
All that
I wrote
work.
it backwards for no reason. Oh no. Oh
It's
well.
probably because it's backwards with you looking at it through your screen.
Right. Okay.
Man, what a moment.
Well, like I said, we're amateurs, and our tens of followers will understand, man.
No, you're
They'll
good.
understand.
You're
I
good.
do want to parlay that into giving, I guess, Chris to tell the story of how we originally discovered you, because it's so crazy that you kind of, in our little ass town, you've kind of taken a little bit of like a wildfire effect around the people around us.
Yeah.
But I
Exciting.
want to give him a chance to tell the whole story.
All right. So, you know the Discover Weekly thing on Spotify. This would have been maybe 2016. I was getting really heavy into like singer-songwriter stuff after my awakening with Ed Sheeran when I was like a junior, senior in high school. For some reason, I took a liking to Ed Sheeran, so I was like, singer-songwriter. I can sing, I can't play guitar, but I really like that, and I was inspired to some degree. But so you popped up on my Discover Weekly, and the song Taxi, and I was just picking up the guitar, and I figured out those chords, and I started playing Taxi, and I just decided to record a video and post it, and lo and behold, Brian Dunne Music liked the video. Do you remember doing that? Probably
I
not.
don't remember doing that, but it sounds like something I would do.
So
That's
you
awesome.
like the video, and I was absolutely hyped about it, and I started listening to all your other stuff, and I started showing everyone I knew Brian Dunne Music, and yeah, you've got a little bit of a cult following out here in Wyoming now.
Oh, sweet. I'll have to make the trip then.
Yeah, dude. I think you could sell out a little bar room out here. I mean, there wouldn't.
Oh shit.
That's funny, man. The Discover Weekly thing has been really cool, because the weird thing about Spotify is like nobody knows who works those or like puts things on those playlists, or
Right.
it's like a big mystery to everyone. So I just thank the sky every time somebody says they heard me on one of those things, because I have no idea how it got there. But yeah, that's cool. That's good to know, because Spotify kind of functions like the radio now. People really do discover music
Right.
through them, and that's like that was when it came about, and there was a big backlash. I didn't foresee it becoming such like a music curating platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been super beneficial to me to just be able to discover artists that I would have otherwise never come across.
Right.
Being out here, I mean, the days of bopping into a record store and picking out a couple albums to take home and listen to, I don't know. Those days kind of seem like they're over.
Well, I think what's interesting is I obviously still I have a pretty extensive vinyl collection, but like I feel like it's more of like you buy the albums that really mean a lot to you, or the artists you really want to support, or it's not quite as much of a like I don't usually go to the record store and pick up a bunch of things I've never heard of and walk out $300 later and like,
Yeah, it seems kind of risky.
It is risky.
It's kind of weird to think that people used to do that. Like I remember going to the like Sam Goody and just buying stuff that I liked the cover of, and then I'd like put it in the car, in my mom's car, and be like, oh, this is not good at all.
Oh, dude, I can remember walking in with a $20 bill in my pocket, picking up little Backstreet Boys back in the day, and
Hell
boy,
yeah.
that didn't age well. But at the time, I mean, shit,
It'll come back around.
Yeah,
you
it
watch.
will.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember this one specific time. My oldest brother like got into downloading music onto my mom's computer, and he downloaded a Linkin Park album. And one of my buddies came over. We're maybe 10 years old, and my brother recorded him. He burned him a disc of Linkin Park. And a couple weeks later, I'm out at my buddy's house, and his mom asked him what that CD was, and he was like, "Oh, it's Linkin Park." And she's like, "Give it to me." Puts it in the CD player, plays one song, and she said, "This is absolute garbage." Takes it out and then under the tire of the car, just stopped on the side of the road, put it under the tire and drove over it, and then drove off.
Whoa.
For Lincoln Park, yeah.
That's traumatic, man.
Yeah, that gives you a little of
man.
an idea of how conservative Wyoming can be at times.
Wow. I gotta imagine we're probably about the same age. But I'm 31, but I remember the Linkin Park phenomenon. My parents
Yes.
were super cool about buying me records that had the parental advisory sticker on it, though. I gotta give them props for that. I was
Yeah.
always allowed to watch R-rated movies and stuff.
Hell yeah.
It was good. It messed up my brain, but here we are.
No, here you are.
Absolutely. I did want to mention something that Chris brought up to me a little bit earlier before we started. I completely spaced ever saying it, but when he said it, it just kind of rung in my head. Talking about buying albums in whole and just listening to an album front to back in the first place is kind of taboo now. But I did mention to him one time, I don't know how long ago, probably freshly after he discovered it, but just the fact that you can hop on the interstate, especially here, you have an hour drive, and you can put on Brian Dunne on shuffle and just not skip a beat, man, for hours and hours. I mean, it's close enough to just keep it in a vibe, but also, I mean, the lyric is just impeccable to me that you can just keep it on shuffle, keep it rolling. And that's something that, I mean, I don't qualify myself as a connoisseur or an expert by any means, but it's something a little bit different compared to just, one hit wonders and mixing through just a random playlist, if that makes
thanks,
sense.
man.
There's
That
no
means a
way
lot
for
to
you
me.
to respond to that. It wasn't a question,
Yeah,
but feel free.
I receive your compliment and I appreciate it.
Does that make sense?
The discography speaks for itself.
Thank you. I try.
Well, I appreciate it, man. It's been huge for me, man. Just listening to your music, and it's not like anything else I was ever into, and I just love it, man. I love it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I love doing it. It's it's funny because the record has been out as of tomorrow. It will be out 2 months, and it's weird because normally I'd be touring it, but because I can't do that, I'm sort of sitting here, and I emailed Andrew Sarla today, who produced the last record, and we're starting to work on the next one because I'm like, what are we gonna do? We just
right.
Right.
That's a perfect segue into a question that we've got sent in from somebody. It's a video, so we'd play it right now, obviously after the editing process. But the question is, the first one is, do you think that these last few months have helped you kind of hone it in as a singer-songwriter, give you more ample opportunity? I know you're probably more of a night performer, and so you usually use the days to do that anyway, but has it given you that ample time to kind of sit down and hone some more stuff in?
Well, it kind of fell at the quarantine and all the things that are going on in the world right now it's an interesting it's a very interesting time to be alive, and I feel like a lot of the last few months has been sort of absorbing because you kind of have to, especially after you finish one record before you start another one, you kind of have to like observe and grow and take things in. So that's what I've been mostly doing over the last couple of months. I've got like 3 or 4 new tunes that I like, but what I've mostly been trying to do is sort of expand my mind, read a lot, watch a lot of movies that I hadn't watched, try to understand what I want to say about living through this particular time. Because, when you're making an album, it has to age well. It has to, it won't come out 2 years from now, so those songs still have to be fresh in 2 years, So it can be enticing to write stuff that's very of the moment, but there's a little bit of like uneasiness with that I'm sort of waiting to see how some of these things play out in the real world.
Understandably, yeah.
Write them into the song.
Not many people talk about that, the consuming side of writing and stuff, that you have to take in just as much, if not much more than you're putting out. So that's a good point. Not many people will tell you that part of it. They just tell you to write.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to write because it's like a muscle, but yeah, no, you have to let the leaves grow on the trees sometime.
Strong.
That is super strong. So aside from your music, I just was curious, what was the last 9-to-5 job that you had?
The last 9-to-5 job was at the guitar shop in high school.
Wow.
That was the last time I had a 9-to-5
Man,
job.
I commend you for that, man. I'm still on that 9-to-5 grind. It sucks, but
Yeah, I hear you. When I got to New York, I played like events, people's weddings and shit, and it was just as bad. It was a job. I wore a suit. I loaded in through the
Oh
kitchen of
man.
the of the Waldorf. It was not, so it wasn't technically a 9 to 5, but it was
Felt like it.
yeah, it was soul torture. I did that till I was like 24, 25, and then I was able to stabilize my touring career enough to afford to quit. And
Yeah.
I did
So
so very proudly.
how does your tour schedule look? I mean, obviously I didn't do a bunch of looking into it, but I assume you're probably moving around quite a bit as far as the local scene and then expanding throughout the area. But
Well,
how,
right now everything's kind of on hold.
well, sure.
So,
Yeah. My question would be, I guess, how do you go from tour life or show to just
oh,
quarantine? Sorry, I'm
yeah.
a little incompetent with this.
No, it's honestly it's been um you hate to make light of a dark situation because it's such harrowing events that have kept us locked in these houses, but um it's pretty unique. I haven't come off the road in 7 years, and because of the status of my career, I'm kind. There's never like I go on tour and then I'm off. It's usually like
Mhm.
I'm always sort of on tour. I'm always leaving to go to a show or a set of shows, or coming back to do a weekend of shows and then I got to sleep it off for Monday, and then.
Right.
Um, so it's been actually a really wonderful time to really reconnect to the real world and think and write and hang out with my wife, and it's the first time I've been home for this amount of time since I was a child, you know.
Gotcha.
And cuz yeah, I'm usually crisscrossing the nation and trying to, take over the world.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I know you went on a string of shows out in like the California area this past year. Um,
Mhm.
you were in Charlotte, I believe, like October, November, maybe, or maybe
That
it was
sounds like
February.
something I would do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but you were gonna. I was living in Winston Salem
Oh.
this past year, and you were in Charlotte, and I had like 48 hours notice, and I tried to get it off, couldn't get it off. Super bummed about it,
Uh
but do you have any plans when all of this is over of coming out to the Rocky Mountain region?
Yeah, I'd like to get to Denver because it's actually one of my top streaming markets, weirdly.
I
Maybe
can see
that's you
it.
guys.
That
Maybe
might be
Definitely.
us, dude. It could just
Spread
um
the
be me
word.
solely.
yeah, I would like to get back to Denver. I love it out. Actually, before all this happened, I had a show on the books that has now since passed in May that I was going to play at the Soiled Dove. Uh and we're still, yeah, it's a weird thing cuz I don't know when concerts are going to come back.
Hmm.
And right off the bat, we rescheduled everything. And then as this became, clearer into the picture, it was more serious than we thought. We all had to reschedule them again. So now nobody wants to do it again. So
Hmm. Hmm.
everybody's just waiting. And I'm beginning to leave the house for some live stream shows where I can go to the venue because we're starting to ease up in that way. And some outdoor shows are gonna go off this summer. So, but it'll be
That's awesome.
sparse until
The
people are
first,
able to,
yeah.
Let me be the one
congregate.
that puts this in your brain, but I was listening to Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. I'm
Uh-huh.
not sure if you're a comedy fan. I
Yeah,
assume you
no.
are. I think you're funny.
Oh, thanks.
But
Yeah, no, I love those guys.
so I'm listening to them, and I guess Bert is going on a drive-in movie theater tour
Right.
during this whole thing. They're going to be in cars. There's going to be one in Fort Collins, by the way, Chris. We should probably go.
Yeah,
In
we probably
addition
should.
to that, I want to be able to say I'm the person that might have put that in your brain if you decide to, maybe do some drive-ins. But have you considered
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah, I will. I'm on the front line of doing anything and all things. So, um, the drive-in shows are interesting because I guess you need some sort of like wireless capabilities to pipe the sound into the car. I guess people could roll down their windows.
Oh yeah, put the top down, boy.
But isn't that
Yeah.
like the vibe of the drive-in? Like they pipe the sound into your car
Right.
Yeah.
speakers?
I don't
For
know if they do it through like the radio station, if there's
That's how
radio
Bert
station.
described
Yeah.
it. He said they would whatever reserve a radio station and then they would all tune into it. But obviously with music, I think you could just get away with just put the top down, windows down, it's summertime, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm very into making this happen because I do get the itch to play, and it feels live streaming has been cool, and it's been great to be able to play shows and then go into the kitchen and make myself a snack. Like that's like pretty usually I'm driving for like 12 hours after the show. But it's not, I miss that hit, the hit of adrenaline you get from the interaction with the audience and everything.
Yeah, I've been seeing that big time with the stand-up shows like Colbert, even John Oliver.
Oh, dude, it's
like
crazy.
the jokes are not landing like they do with crowd interaction.
It's like you need that applause just to signify that it's okay to laugh. Otherwise, like it could be the best joke in the world, but if it's delivered to silence, it doesn't.
It's
almost
really
eerie. It's like this dark little, I don't know, like Bill Maher, for example, did it well for like a week, and it was funny, and you're like, oh, he's just making a mockery of it.
Right.
And then after that, you're like, dude, this is fucking weird.
Well,
like, give it up.
Yeah, there's a novelty to it that I think is wearing thin as we go into our third or fourth month of this.
Yeah.
We're right away
in the thick of it.
Yeah, at the first month it was kind of cute to watch your favorite artists set up their shit in their house and have the cat knock it over. But now it's like, how many live streams can I watch?
Right.
So I am very much looking forward to playing some live music. I don't know. I know that there's a concert series in Jersey that just said they're going to go ahead with their outdoor concerts.
Good for them.
But honestly, because things are so sparse, I was thinking like, there's no rhyme or reason. All the booking agents a lot of them are laid off right now, or just trying to figure out how to make their bigger tours, their bigger cash cows happen. I was like, maybe I just like hit them up by myself and just be like, hey, can I come play music here?
I mean, hey, man, it worked with me and you. So I would tell you, it's shoot your shot 2020.
Yeah,
so
man.
just shoot your shot.
Yeah,
it's insane, man. I forget where I was going to go. I had something in my head. Oh, I wanted to ask, when was your first real paid gig? Where you as a younger kid, you're thinking, man, I might have made it. I just made it. That kind of thing. Because that's where my brain would go.
Let me think. I remember my guitar teacher. My guitar teacher took me, like his guitar player couldn't make a gig. So he took me on a gig. I was probably like 13. And we played this thing called the Blues Train in Cooperstown, New York, which is where the Baseball Hall of Fame is.
Hell yeah.
It's good like 6 hours away from where I was from, or 5 hours, something like that. So we drove all the way up there. And it was totally just like a cover gig. I'd never played a gig before. Like, I remember right when the train started. So it was like a booze cruise, but a train. If you can imagine that. And I remember like right as the train started moving, I don't know if you guys play electric, but like your amp, the reverb on your amp, like it makes a noise if you like a pretty aggressive noise. And I remember like not even knowing what that was, and everybody being like, "You gotta turn the amp down, man." But I remember this lady was like really, really drunk, and I remember she fell over my monitor, and her whole pants split, and like like her ass was out and everything. And I remember thinking like, this is super fun. I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life.
At least you got it out of the way, though.
Yeah, right.
I was just letting the producer know that I need a beer.
Craig, I could go for
anything
one too.
You got brewing over there?
I'm still starstruck a little bit. So I asked you ever been to the Rocky Mountain region? You said you played a little bit in Denver. So this was post the whole 420 movement. We legalized marijuana in Colorado.
Yeah.
And you're in New York. Is that a thing there? I don't really know. Is
how like the weed culture here?
Yeah.
So it's decriminalized. It's not legalized.
Okay.
So New York has its own sort of like culture around it. I don't know if you've ever seen the show High Maintenance on HBO.
Yes,
but it's very much like that, where your delivery guy is just like a dude that comes over once every couple weeks, and But so it's not legalized, and I'm for that. But I'm for legalizing it, but I also am slightly romantic about the sort of gritty way that it happens here, that I don't want to lose that, you know.
Definitely.
Having to go through the back channels to pick yourself up a 20 sack of something.
Yeah, and it's not particularly dangerous or anything like that. It's not like, you know, it's just like kind of part of the interaction of New York City. So I like it. It's classic. But, you know, hey, if it being legalized means people can't be arrested and thrown in jail for some crazy soft marijuana possession crime, like I'm all for that. So
yeah,
I'm going to back you up against the ropes here. Since Chris went that direction. I was watching, oh shit, man, I think it was called Paste Magazine. You did like a 3-song set on there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something, I don't remember which song it was, but a psychedelic experience influencing your songwriting and stuff. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of expand on that if you wanted to. We had a painter in here that was similar in that aspect, that it impacted him quite a bit. So I wanted to hear if you're up for it.
Oh yeah, no, totally. That's a good question too. It was the whole album kind of like the psychedelic drugs, mushrooms, and mainly were interesting for me because I was always very set in my ways and very a bit rigid and stubborn, and it just shows you that there's another way to perceive things. And so I sort of drew upon that when I was writing some of the stuff like Nothing Matters Anymore, how strange life was at this current moment, and how upside down and left was right and right
and
was wrong.
you thought, and then the months to follow. But go ahead. Sorry.
I love that song, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. So that provided some inspiration. I don't want to make too much of a meal out of it. I mean, I take inspiration from a good, bowl of pasta if I could too. So, but yeah, no, I was drawing on those sort of psychedelic, reality turned inside out type of things.
So I see you picked up your guitar there.
Yeah, it's like my blanket.
I feel that sometimes too, man. And obviously I'm not anywhere near the quality you are, but sometimes I get a little anxiety and I just need to have a guitar in my hands.
Yeah, I just pick it up. It's like sticking my thumb in my mouth or something. It's like it's just comforting.
What are you playing there?
This is that's a G&L. What is it? It's called a Doheny. It's kind of like a Jazzmaster type of guitar. They made it a couple of years ago, and honestly, it's like a custom. I totally fell in love with it just for cosmetic reasons. Like, it's got this awesome racing stripe.
It is sharp, yeah.
Yeah, it feels good. I like playing it. The thing, I do so many shows by myself, but when I do get to play with a band, this thing rips. Like, I feel like I'm 10 times the guitar player that I normally am with this guitar. So it's kind of like riding a sports car or something.
I gotcha. How often do you hammer on that whammy bar?
I lean on it pretty heavily. I'm pretty.
There you go.
All the new demos have some sort of like weird wobbly. I like that sort of like that wobble that cassettes used to have, and you can kind of get that by just like kind of hanging onto it and playing block chords and stuff.
All right, so I didn't want to get too much into the specifics of your songs and songwriting, but the song Chelsea Hotel.
Oh, dude, my favorite.
Gravitated towards that song. That's a real hotel, and is Chelsea in Manhattan like one of the, I don't want to say suburbs because that's not the right, like boroughs, I guess.
Chelsea's an area of Manhattan.
Area.
In the West 20s on the streets, and the Chelsea Hotel was sort of a famous hotel that, like a lot of poets, it's a very romanticized hotel. Sid shot Nancy in the Chelsea Hotel, and it's over romanticized, honestly. I've never been inside it. I don't know if you can even go inside it now. Patti Smith lived there. But it was also sort of known as a drug den,
Okay.
And I actually based the entire song. I was listening to this interview with this guy, Mark Spitz, who used to write for Spin magazine.
Yeah.
Also a hell of a swimmer, I think.
Mark Spitz?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Hot take.
I don't know. Maybe I was wrong there. I'm sorry.
He was talking. It was a Mark Maron interview, and I remember him talking about the first time he did heroin, and how and I totally pulled this quote from him, and he said he fell through the floor, and I thought, like, wow, that's
powerful.
Yeah, so I kind of based the song around that, and the song is sort of, I'll say it. It's a coded message about heroin, and that's sort of what I'm trying to convey. But other people have come up to me and said the songs mean something else to them. So I don't know,
it's captivating, man. The songwriting on that specifically got me on the rest of them anyway. Like,
oh, thanks.
That one just kind of sets apart for me. I don't know how in your own discography how you feel it rates in all your stuff, but I think it's one of the best.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sorry to keep complimenting you, but that's how we do it.
I'll take them.
So my Jagoff cousin waited all day to ask me this real important question. He says, ask him about songwriting and how it comes together, whether it be lyrics first, guitar, piano. What's the first thing he picks up? And he has his own theory, because he's a big shot, that writing music starts on a piano is the most effective way to do it.
I've written some songs on a piano, but ultimately it starts with just like a developable idea. That's usually what I start with. It's not lyrics, or because I wouldn't write without an instrument, but well, that's not true. Sometimes I sing into my phone. I've gotten some good ideas in my phone voice messages when I'm like driving or whatever. But it's a little different every time, but mostly it's nonsensical. Like I'll have like a line that I like. I like the way it sort of, floats off the tongue, and I have some sort of melody attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of build the song around that. That's generally how I do it. Some people, like Paul Simon, like he writes the music first, he writes to the track. So, there's all different ways to do it. And I would totally do that if I found some piece of music particularly captivating or that lent itself to a lyric. But there's no right or wrong way to eat a Reese's.
That's strong too.
Yeah, because it's so individualized, and I feel like as a songwriter, and I'm just a baby at this, but you play to your strengths, and if your strength is putting the words on the page and then figuring it out from there, I mean, there's, like you said, there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's.
Yeah, I think that I have always strummed something or some sort of pattern and sang a line that I liked, and then thought about where I would want to hear. That's mostly what songwriting is, right? We're writing the things that we would want to hear. So that's just what I try to do.
I love it.
Bear with me as I try to explain this. I talked about it beforehand, but the best way for me to kind of describe your music as a whole is it's something that I have stuck in my head, and it's along the same path of you're looking for a certain word and you can't think of it, and then someone spits out and it just kind of clicks in your head. For some reason, your music clicks in my head like that, like a song that I've lost over time that I've been looking for, but I've never heard it, if that makes sense.
Can I interject here a little bit?
Please do.
Okay, so you, to some effect, come from the school of some of that 70s classic rock vibe, I feel, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm wearing a Bob Seger t-shirt.
Right.
Fuck yeah.
My man's Blaine here was, and this is no bullshit, legitimately conceived after an Eagles concert.
Right on, man.
So I feel like it makes sense. I feel like it makes a lot of sense that clicks in your brain, Blaine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. That's a good place to be conceived.
Yeah.
Well, that's meaningful, because I do think that that's a big part of what songs are. That they're the putting your finger on the thing you've always wanted to say but never could find the words for.
You did much better explaining that than I did.
No, I just paraphrased what you said.
Thank you.
I think that a lot of times, you ever like have a conversation with somebody and you're talking, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is you're talking about. Like, I feel like the great thing about songs is you can keep throwing shit at the wall until you find the gem. Do you know what I mean?
Good
the
point.
thing that makes your hair stand up, the thing that's exactly what you're trying to say. And it's just, you can't live edit in conversation, your thoughts can just kind of cavalcade out of your mouth. But the great thing about songwriting is you can just vomit a bunch of stuff onto the paper and cross everything that doesn't make you excited out, and that's you're sort of like you're waxing,
Well,
Love a good dead
what's our
air.
time look like? Well, I know that you wanted like 42 an hour, so I was just checking what time it was.
Yeah, they'll probably cut us off pretty soon, right?
Yeah. Well, actually,
We big leagued it for you.
yeah,
Oh.
I went ahead and pulled the trigger on the yearly subscription, so they said
Ooh.
unlimited recording time. But I don't want to hold you up. It's getting late out there on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's about 10. Yeah, but I'm down for a few more questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had talked a little bit about stand-up comedy. There's kind of, from my understanding, a little bit of a difference between like LA stand-up and New York stand-up. I was just wondering, who are some of your favorite New York stand-up comedians?
Well, I love Mike Birbiglia.
Okay.
I love John Mulaney. Anything that those guys do, I go see. All the players on SNL, they're always around. So like Michael Che, we go see his shows.
You've seen Che live?
Yeah, I've seen Che live. I've seen 80 Bryant do improv. I've seen Vanessa Bayer do improv because they gotta like work out their stuff, know. So they're around.
They're all absolutely hilarious. I mean,
yeah,
obviously they work on SNL.
It's one of my favorite things about living in New York is the ability to see these huge comics come in and workshop their stuff. One night we were at the Comedy Cellar and Chris Rock came in to work on his SNL monologue, and he was hosting that week. So this was like a Monday night, and that's been some of the greatest moments I've had in New York. Just like sitting in a diner with friends after somebody like that rolls in, and you're just like, can you fucking believe?
That's the best part about that, though, and that's what I envy so much is that you can go there on a Tuesday night, whether it be LA or New York, and just catch anybody. I mean, Dave Chappelle might stop in. Like,
he's got to work out his stuff somewhere.
Right.
The one of the biggest, and that I think about that all the time. Like I write songs, but then I bounce them off a few trusted ears to know if they work or not. But jokes, you can't work them out until you hear people laugh.
Yeah.
So the biggest Seinfeld has to like go to the club, and figure that stuff out. I think that's so cool.
That by itself is just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Mark Norman just toured with him. I'm not sure how long ago, but as his opening act, I love Mark Norman. But
he's great.
They're kind of like two complete opposites almost. And Jerry claims that he's one of his favorites, best up and coming, that kind of thing.
That's
Mark
crazy.
Norman's a New York comic, right?
Yeah. He's
I see him around a lot.
Yeah, he hosts that podcast with Joe List, Tuesdays with Stories. Shout out. But I was actually thinking about that before we came on, like the dynamic, because like I really look up to you, and like just talking to you, being able to talk to you. He tells a story about how he just like bumped into Jerry Seinfeld or whatever. He told him he was a good comic or whatever, and I don't know how to say it, but
he's calling you Jerry Seinfeld essentially.
Yeah, you're my Jerry Seinfeld. Right?
I'll take that. Sure.
Like I told you, don't let me fanboy too hard, but I really am.
I appreciate that.
Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us in our
to nobodies.
Yeah.
No, we're all nobodies.
Fuck yeah.
Cheers
dude.
that.
All right.
So
cheers, guys.
Be on the lookout for Brian Dunne. Plug anything you want, obviously. But yeah,
I got a new record out. It's called Selling
crazy.
Things. That's it. There it is.
Go check it out.
Now.
It's fire, dude. It's absolute fire. Thanks for being on, brother. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.